I'm Alexi, LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking, World Cup qualifying, MLS playoffs, Wolverines get back, World Cup 26 hosts, U.S. men's national team, zombies, Qatar, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire, and a faithful and proud and happy Wolverine. Mosse, how are you? Dun, 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 dun. All right. Congratulations, by the way. Just ahead of time. We'll get it out of the way, but we're going to talk much more about your Wolverines later on in the show. But how are you just feeling right now on this Monday morning?
Yeah, doing well. I had planned to lead the podcast off talking about this game, but Luis Aguilar threw us for a loop. He has chosen an AskAlexi question about the game, so we're going to save it for down there.
Well, Luis, for all of his faults, understands the value of a tease, okay? And so this is what people are tuning in for this week anyways, to hear your thoughts on Wolverine football. And so we're gonna put it off to a little bit later in the show and let you grin and celebrate, and like I say, just bask in the glory of your victory.
Yeah, Luis, when he's not bumping Logic music, he's putting a lot of thought into how to structure this podcast. But we do have a sexy topic to open this pod with. Can I presume you have finally finished The Wire?
I have finished The Wire, my friend. It is done. I liked it better than The Sopranos. More so because I felt there were more redeeming qualities of more people within it. Remember, The Sopranos, the only real person that I cared about in any redeeming type of sense was the daughter. I think the daughter.
Meadow.
Was yes, her. And so I do want, look, I'm all for villains and people that are horrible. You need all that, but I do need some balance. And I just thought that The Sopranos, I didn't ultimately care if any of them survived, and I didn't feel invested in it. As opposed to The Wire, where I actually cared about some of those people. It did jump the shark a little bit. I think The Sopranos stuck to what it was better. I think ultimately it was probably better writing. And sometimes look, you have a show and it explodes, and maybe you don't even know any type of arc out there, and you're trying to figure it out. So I did think that it meandered much more so than like The Sopranos.
Yeah, the fifth season was very problematic. The McNulty serial killer storyline was ridiculous. That Scott Templeton character. It's funny because the media spent 4 seasons praising that show for how realistic it was. And then when they did a season that focused on the media and it was so awkwardly done, a lot of journalists sort of retroactively started to wonder, were the first 4 seasons as realistic as I thought? So there was that issue with The Wire at the end.
And I will say that I guess not since Game of Thrones has, and we talked about this before, has a show kind of surprised me more in terms of people dying. Just you think that people are going to last throughout the show, and next thing you know, someone's dead, and that actually was kind of cool in that nobody was safe out there. But so I did enjoy that part of it.
No, I forgot to mention last week, we talked about how my first concert I went to was Wu-Tang Clan. Mm-hmm. There's a member of the Wu-Tang Clan, Method Man, who is an actor on The Wire. He played Cheese.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay, so I didn't know that. All right, cool. I mean, yeah, there's probably a whole other part of the story in the background because something successful like this that I could probably read books about or web pages and all that kind of stuff. But yes, I finished that, so I'm proud of myself. What did you watch this week? Anything interesting or see this week or read this week?
The usual stuff. All-time great Succession episode last night. Kristen Scott really needs to get caught up on that show because it's been tremendous this season. Solid Curb episode. I might go see another movie this week. This House of Gucci. Mm-hmm. Lady Gaga, apparently terrific in it, so that's caught my interest.
Okay. I have 3 things to recommend. One, and it's getting a lot of play, obviously, is the Get Back Beatles documentary on Disney+. It is 3-part by the great Peter Jackson. It is, it's basically about 6 hours if you put it all together. And they have just this incredible footage of the Beatles in both, I can't remember what the name of the studio is, Twickenham or whatever, and then at the Abbey Road Studios, that literally just goes through not just seeing these greats at work and coming up at times on the spot with these iconic songs and seeing them in their embryonic state and seeing how they they go about creating those, which that in of itself is fascinating. But then the whole dynamic of a group that ultimately is falling apart, and then seeing them after they get used to the cameras there constantly be themselves, and the narratives that we have, and dispelling some of the myths and the rumors, and Yoko Ono is there. So in general, it's just really, really interesting. If you are into the Beatles, it definitely is interesting. If you're into music, it definitely is. But even if you're not, if you're not, it probably goes too long and it's a little bit too in the weeds at times. But I just thought it was fascinating to see, especially the dynamic between everybody, and the alpha type of role and male that Paul McCartney was and is in that, especially at that moment. I thought that John Lennon came off much better than I had viewed him. I think that George Harrison didn't change. He was at times distant and already kind of thinking of different things, but obviously a genius, as they all were. And then Ringo, who, while he was in it from a visual perspective, didn't talk a whole lot through it, and is just kind of the sage behind the scenes who just is just happy to be there. I don't think the image of Ringo, I don't think, changed a whole lot of this. I think the image in particular of Paul McCartney and John Lennon, especially their relationship, which I think was a whole lot more cordial and friendly and beautiful in a sense after seeing this film. So that was really, really cool. I recommend that highly. Dig Deeper is a multiple part series on the disappearance of Brigitte Meyer. It's on Netflix, and it's a crazy story out of Germany, and goes into an investigation and a missing person that ultimately ends up in a murder and all that kind of stuff. And then just randomly, have you ever heard of this movie? I saw it on Netflix. It's called Army of Thieves. And it is evidently, I didn't know until I started doing research after I saw it, that it is a prequel to a movie called Army of Death, which is a zombie apocalypse type of movie. And usually I don't care for, it's not really horror, but those types of movies. But I really got into it. And this guy who evidently directed it and starred in it, Matthias Schweinhofer, is both obviously incredibly talented, but really, really funny. And I really enjoyed his character in both of these things. So I saw Army of Thieves first, which, not knowing, was the prequel, although it came out second. And then I went back and watched Army of Death. I thought Army of Thieves was the better of the two. And evidently there's a third, so there's a trilogy coming out there. So zombies, if you're into that, then watch Army of Death. If you're into locksmiths and heists type of movie, then Army of Thieves is for you.
I think neither one of those I'll be watching, but
Okay.
the Beatles thing I'll definitely watch.
You will?
I love the Beatles, yeah. And then the true crime Germany documentary you mentioned. So those two for sure.
Yeah, the Beatles things it's something else, and that they had all of this footage kind of sitting around for so long, and that they finally put it together. It's pretty
fair
amazing.
to say Lennon and McCartney had an Avon Stringer type.
Yes,
alpha
if we
dog
really want to get
relationship.
all wiry about it. Yes. All right, my friend. Anything else?
That's it.
All right, ready to light this candle?
Let's do it.
As you know, each and every time at the beginning of the pod, we kick the pod off with, yes, it's time for my State of the Union, where I look at a part of the game from an American perspective. And this week, it goes a little something like this. The World Cup, by definition, involves the world, and the world of soccer is much more than Europe. But this week, when Italy and Portugal, both top 10 teams in the world, were drawn in the same playoff group of UEFA World Cup qualifying, meaning only one of these teams will qualify for the World Cup in Qatar, well, the angst and consternation from some was rather telling. Now, FIFA has 211 member associations or countries. Each confederation decides how they want to organize their World Cup qualifying. UEFA, Europe, has 13 World Cup qualifying spots. That means Europe has around 40% of the 32 teams in the World Cup. For some context, the next closest confederation is CAF, Africa, with 5 spots, or around 14%. Now, this weighted allocation is not wrong. FIFA must balance an idealistic desire to make the World Cup as accessible as possible for teams with a practical desire to make the World Cup as attractive as possible for fans. But some suggesting that Italy or Portugal deserve to be at the Qatar World Cup over lesser-known teams around the world is snobby, elitist, and hypocritical. It's just another way of saying, let them eat cake. And by the way, if the Super League concept was an affront to your moral sensibilities, then this should be too. All right, Mosse, there is my State of the Union for this week. And fear not, if you are here for some MLS talk, we just put that to the second part of this podcast. And we're definitely not burying the lead. But, this kind of came out over the last week, and it really piqued my interest, especially in terms of the way that people reacted, as I mentioned in the State of the Union, because we're coming down to the real nitty gritty and business end of the qualifications. We know that there's teams mostly in Europe, actually all in Europe, that have already qualified, and the two teams from CONMEBOL with Brazil and Argentina, and so everybody is trying to get their spot. And as is the case in every World Cup, there are going to be some disappointments and some failures and some surprises. You need look no further than someone like Italy, for example, not making the World Cup. But it always brings out this interesting discussion about fairness and balance and equality within a collective. And that is ultimately what FIFA is. As I mentioned, all of their members are equally important in the eyes of FIFA, but we all know that they're not equally important because a selection of them, and primarily European teams, carry incredible weight and leverage, and they use that power at different times. And rightfully so, FIFA has to be aware and wary of that. But when you saw this new draw and pathway to the World Cup that UEFA has gone with right now, what were your thoughts, Mosse?
I was surprised, and we're all so cynical that you don't think something like this is actually going to happen, even though in theory it's supposed to be a random draw. But I agree with your State of the Union. As you mentioned, it's a balancing act, not unlike what we see with the UEFA Champions League. One could argue the fifth place finisher in the Premier League is better than most of the teams that get in, but you're trying to balance having a strong competition with quality teams and quality players, but also understanding that the charm of these competitions is the fact that you're spreading it around. And I think where it's at right now is more or less okay. You can argue on the margins, maybe Europe deserves one or two more spots. But as you mentioned, 40% of the teams are from Europe. The way these groups were laid out in qualifying, all the big teams still should have made it. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for Italy or Portugal if they miss out. So yeah, I pretty much agree with you.
Well, so this new pathway with semifinals and then finals in order to determine the next three and the last three when it comes to Europe is new this time. And as you mentioned, Italy, first off, they have to beat, Macedonia?
So should we go through all the matches?
Let's just go through them right now so we know.
So Portugal will host Turkey, Italy will host North Macedonia, and then...
it's not assured, by the way, that Portugal's even getting past Turkey.
Absolutely.
Okay?
And then it's been determined via draw that the Portugal-Turkey winner would host the final in that little bracket there. Okay. And then the other ones...
so even if Italy goes through and beats Macedonia, which they should, they will have to play away in Portugal.
Yeah, if that Portugal-Italy game happens, it would be in Portugal. And then Scotland will face Ukraine, Wales will face Austria, and it's been determined that the Wales-Austria winner would host the final there. And then Russia will host Poland, Sweden will host Czech Republic, and it's been determined that the Russia-Poland winner, correct, Luis, will host the final in that section.
Okay, all right. And then we will determine those three. And look, this is, like I said, this angst and consternation out there from some is to be expected. I mean, look, we see it in, for example, MLS, right? The collective and the haves and the have-nots. And I guarantee that there are times when they sit down at a table and there are owners that look over at other owners and say, you're kind of freeloading off of the work that we're doing because we're spending all this money. We are doing bigger and better things, and you get to partake in the success that we have, even though you're not holding up your end of the bargain and keeping up with us. But, that's part of what being in, an association, a group, a collective type of situation is part. I mean, we see it in politics. We see it in the UN, for example, and the haves and the have-nots. And why should this country be spending so much more than others, and you need to pay your fair share and do all that kind of stuff. So this is nothing new. But if you want to be involved in that membership, then you have to recognize that there are going to be inequities. There are going to be inequalities. And yes, there is an element of charity, I guess, and benevolence on the part of the haves versus the have-nots. And that is kind of baked into any type of situation. But we also know that at a certain point, the haves can feel that they are being taken advantage of, can feel that they can do better on their own, at which point people think, well, we are going to go off on our own because we're not getting out of this what we thought we were going to get out of it, or we want to get more out of it, which is why you have something like the Super League, which I mentioned in the State of the Union.
Yeah, there's a whole historical context here with FIFA. I mentioned this last week. The first 8 World Cups were all in Europe and South America, and most of the teams were from Europe and South America. So soccer was not really a global sport back then. And then in the early 70s, a Brazilian, João Avelange, ran for the FIFA presidency, looking to unseat the incumbent, an Englishman named Stanley Rouse. And Avelange's whole campaign was that FIFA was elitist and he was going to make soccer a truly global game. And he appealed to all these other regions that felt underrepresented. And he won. And he was in charge for over 20 years. And then his handpicked successor, Sepp Blatter, was in charge for another 20 years. And sure, their reigns were problematic in a myriad of ways. There was all sorts of corruption. But one thing they did achieve was make soccer global and the World Cup bigger. They expanded the tournament, gave spots to all these other regions. They've moved the tournament around more. We talked about this last week. Since 94, the U.S. hosted it. South Korea and Japan co-hosted it. South Africa, now Qatar. They created the Club World Cup, and they put that in places like Japan and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. They've created under 17 and under 20 World Cups and put that in places like that. So it's all been aimed at making the sport more global. And now Gianni Infantino has doubled down on that. The 48-team World Cup is all about giving more spots to these other regions. And so Europe, that does feel like all of a sudden now that, they're losing their vice-like grip on the sport. And so a lot of arguments stem from that. Yeah.
I mean, and listen, if you are out there listening to this and you're saying, but Alexi, but Mosse, these are two great teams. When we're looking at Italy, it's the defending European champions. When we're looking at Portugal, it's Cristiano and company. And yes, from a broadcasting perspective, obviously I would want both of those teams in a World Cup. But, I look at it, and once again, I look at it in terms of this is a World Cup. It is the greatest sporting event and one of the greatest spectacles in the history of our world. It is not necessarily the best teams, as we've talked about, and giving opportunity. By the way, if you are arguing for Portugal and that Italy and Portugal should go to something like that, in a day and age where we are constantly being told to acknowledge our privilege and everything needs to be much more inclusive, and we have to, the haves have to give more and to the have-nots, and there has to be much more recognition that people need help and people need pulling up. Well, this is part of that. If you want the best out of Europe, then you have your Euros. And while the World Cup, I think, is the greatest sporting event, and for many people it is in terms of the popularity, it's not necessarily the best teams, quote unquote, in the world. And that's okay, because we see surprises, we see upsets all the time. If you're looking for Europe to continue dominance, it's a good bet that they are going to continue to be dominant. And just in terms of the percentage, and I mentioned it in the State of the Union, they already have a tremendous amount of representation when it comes to who goes to the World Cup. And I can tell you, and once again, take this with a grain of salt in terms of my work with FIFA. When I sit on some of these calls, that let them eat cake type of mentality, it rubs a lot of people out there the wrong way. And while they recognize the power and the importance of Europe, when attitudes like that start to come out, people bristle, because what you are saying is we're not good enough. And once again, what you're saying is let them eat cake, and that is hard to swallow.
And also, we all...
Not cake. I love cake, but...
bemoan how tedious qualifying can be. The only thing that gives it some sense of drama and purpose is occasionally when a big team misses out. So I don't know why that's so problematic. It's...
And one of the magical and beautiful moments is when teams that we don't always associate with a World Cup actually go to a World Cup. So, anyway.
And by the way, last thing on this, Derek Ray, who was complaining about this on Twitter, he sort of landed on the place of, well, thank God then for the 48-team World Cup, because that's going to alleviate this issue, because Europe presumably is going to get more spots. Again, you can keep referring to it as the 48-team World Cup, and that sounds palatable to people. It's like politics. It's all about the messaging. But look at the fine print. The format they're proposing is 16 groups of 3, which is my big objection to it, because I find that to be a ridiculous format, completely unwieldy for an international tournament. So for folks like Derek Ray, who seem pleased with the 48 teams, ask them, are you in favor of a 16 groups of 3 World Cup? And phrase it like that, and let's see what he says. Because to me, they just picked a random number without giving any thought to whether it lent itself to a cogent format. And the format we're going to end up with in 2026 is ridiculous. So I'd like to see Derek Ray address that.
All right. Well, before we go, because there's actually some other news when it comes to the qualifying process and some of the decisions by FIFA. Of the 3 matchups here, of the 3 groups here, who do you see going through? You mentioned Scotland versus Ukraine and Wales versus Austria. And the winner will meet in, as you mentioned, Wales.
Boy, I don't have a great feel for that.
Well, if you just had to guess off the top of your head, because I'm going to go Ukraine versus Austria. And then I think the winner is ultimately Austria.
I buy that. I'll go with Austria as well.
I'm going to go Poland over Russia.
And you talk about stars. We've got Lewandowski and Zlatan, 2 players we'd love to have in the tournament in that bracket.
So I'm going to make that happen. Poland over Russia. So they're going to play against Sweden in the final, and Poland's going to win against Sweden.
Okay, I buy that.
And then I got Italy over Macedonia, and and then I got Portugal over Turkey, and I got Italy beating Portugal in Portugal.
And the question everybody's been asking, which one of those teams would be a bigger absence from the World Cup, in your view?
It is almost close. I think the thing that changed, because there are obviously a tremendous amount, and I'm talking just from a broadcasting perspective. Well, first off, I think Italy is an exciting team, and you've talked effusively about this Portugal team. So from an entertainment perspective, I think it's the same. From a numbers perspective, I think there's just as many Italian soccer fans in the United States that are going to watch the World Cup as there are Portuguese soccer fans, even if they're just Portuguese fans, and then you add on the fans because of Cristiano Ronaldo. So I think it's stars. So I would say that it would be a bigger loss not to have Cristiano Ronaldo at the World Cup.
And then the other big news regarding qualifying is the draw for the Intercontinental Playoffs, which was good news for CONCACAF because they got paired with Oceania. So the 4th place finisher in CONCACAF.
And it could have been comfortable.
Oceania winner in a 1-game playoff, do or die to go to the World Cup, which makes the other matchup the 5th place finisher in Asia against the 5th place finisher in CONMEBOL, which that's going to be interesting because you look at Asia right now. So the way it works, they're down at 2 groups of 5. The top 2 in each group qualify automatically for the World Cup, and then the 3rd place finishers in each group play each other in a playoff, which gives you the 5th team in Asia. And right now, it looks like either Australia or Japan is going to finish 3rd in their group. They would presumably then they would face the 3rd place finisher in the other group and be heavily favored to win that. Yep. So whoever finishes 5th in CONMEBOL, you're looking at a 1-game do-or-die playoff against either Australia or Japan, which is not a layup at all. I mean, it's probably going to be either Peru or Uruguay or Chile or a team like that, and having to go play Australia or Japan in 1 game to go to the World Cup.
But it's a neutral site in Qatar now, and 1 game, which they've decided due to COVID situations and all that kind of stuff. They just made it very, very simple. By the way, I'm watching those games because that is compelling, must-see type of television with a World Cup place on the line for that. So, but to your point, if you're looking at it from a CONCACAF perspective, whether it's a U.S., I mean, if you're in that position, at least be in an advantageous position for that 4th place team that comes out of CONCACAF. We'll see who ultimately that is that gets to face off, as you mentioned, versus Oceania, as opposed to what potentially could have been a CONMEBOL team. All right, should we move on to some club stuff around the world here?
Yeah, I'll whip through this quickly so this first segment doesn't end up being too beefy. But first, the Premier League, the big match this weekend, Chelsea, Manchester United 1-1 at Stamford Bridge. Sancho gave United the lead. Jorginho equalized from the penalty spot. United essentially had like 3 coaches in this game, because you have Michael Carrick, who's nominally the manager right now, Darren Fletcher, the technical director, who was behaving as if he was the coach, and they've already appointed Ralph Rangnick. There were suggestions that he might have had some input in some of the lineup decisions, including leaving Cristiano Ronaldo out, which we'll get to that in a second. But hiring Rangnick is the smartest thing they've done in a long time. I'm a big fan of his. He's got a Bielsa-like tree. He's influenced Klopp, Tuchel, Nagelsmann, even Jesse Marsch was an assistant under him at Leipzig and speaks very highly of him. So very bright guy. And so he's going to be the interim coach for the rest of the season and then move into a front office position.
Really, he's the architect. He's at least he's being put in a position to be an architect for this team, right?
Yeah, so he's a guy that could really give them some sense of direction. He'll then presumably choose the next head coach. So I like this move for Manchester United. I know Klopp gave an interview where he said this is bad news for the rest of the Premier League. That's how highly he thinks of Rangnick. So, but, one of the hallmarks of Rangnick's style is intense pressing, which is really going to shine a light on this Cristiano Ronaldo issue we've been talking about for weeks now. And it is interesting. The first match after Rangnick is appointed, Ronaldo is on the bench. People put 2 and 2 together there. I mean, Carrick did come out and say, no, that was my decision. But I don't know. What do you make of this, the direction they're going in and what that could mean for Cristiano Ronaldo?
So why can't Cristiano Ronaldo press? I mean, this guy who was made a living off of being a physical specimen doesn't have the ability to press, or just doesn't have the mentality to press?
It's a great question. I was going to get to this with PSG, but I'll bring it up here. This whole notion of attacking players needing to press now, it's led to smart people like Jonathan Wilson suggesting that having Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi on your team at this point in their careers is almost an albatross, because it inhibits your ability to press, which in today's game, if you're not pressing the other team in their own half, that's like half the battle right there. So it's kind of interesting that we've gotten to this point.
It's one thing if they are too old and therefore physically unable to actually do the pressing that you want. It's another thing if they have just come from a different era and obviously have played it. I'm talking about both him and Messi, played in very different type of styles where they've always had the ball. They haven't had to necessarily press all the time. But even to your point, though, Mosse, there was a time where Barcelona would talk about the 6 seconds and before getting the ball back. And so I think that it's disrespectful to say that someone like Cristiano can't do the job of pressing. But maybe they have come to the conclusion that they can't, or they just don't want to. They don't want to invest in having him change his spots. He is that leopard in terms of the way that he plays. But I do believe that unless you physically can't do it, and there's never been a question as to his physical abilities. As a matter of fact, he's at times been freakish relative to most other players, which is why he's been able to play at such a high level for so long. But ultimately, I think that while this is a on the surface a good hire, and you will not find anybody that has anything bad to say about Ralph Rangnick, he is being brought there to kind of oversee and be this architect ultimately. But it's just strange, like you said, with the interim and the temporary types of things, but they obviously have a plan about where they're going. But it's not as if all of a sudden all my fears have been allayed when it comes to Manchester United. And only Manchester United could go and make already a messed up situation look, at least on the surface, even more chaotic and unique, I guess. Well, and staying in that theme, we'll shift over to France. Liga. PSG came from behind to beat Saint-Etienne 3-1. Messi with all 3 assists. Marquinhos with 2 of the goals. Sergio Ramos made his long-awaited debut. But the big story here, Neymar picked up an injury late in the game. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. And this is coming off a Champions League match in which they lost 2-1 away to Manchester City. And those front 3 were lambasted for their unwillingness to help out defensively. Everybody from Thierry Henry to Jamie Carragher concluded that this can't work like this. You can't win defending with only 7 players. And so it's interesting that in the midst of that, Neymar gets injured. Some people saying it's going to be interesting to see this team taking out one of those front 3. Maybe the team will actually make more sense and be more balanced if that's the case. That would make it by subtraction. Very awkward when Neymar comes back. But and for him, look, it's not the worst time of the season to be out. They're running away with Liga and they're locked in the second in their Champions League group. And
if you go by this timetable, he'd be back for the Champions League knockout stage. But it's just frustrating, the stop-start nature of his seasons now. He picks up so many injuries, so here's another one. But yeah, in terms to staying with the pressing, do you think there's a notion where they come out of this a better team and more balanced?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, first off, I think they have enough depth and talent to certainly replace it, so that's not a problem. But Messi set up all 3 goals, you said, without pressing. He was able to do it even without pressing. It's amazing. It's amazing how he's able to do it.
Marquinhos, by the way, he might be the best center back in the world right now. I know I'm biased, but I mean, he's just a phenomenal player, and he chips in goals as well. So,
well, speaking of center back, Sergio Ramos, do we have a Sergio Ramos sighting?
Yeah, and he looked pretty good. So, that's adds another element to that team, and certainly in terms of pedigree, and for a team that wants to win the Champions League, who better than Sergio Ramos to have in the mix? So we'll see where PSG go from there. By the way, this match concluded without being suspended due to fan trouble. So that's an accomplishment for Liga.
Step in the right direction from the folks over there in France. All right, where to now?
In Spain, Barcelona won 3-1 away to Villarreal. Didn't play that great. It was actually their worst performance under Xavi, but they get late goals from Depay and Coutinho. Real Madrid, big win at home to Sevilla. It was 1-1 late, and then Vinicius Jr. scored an absolutely phenomenal goal. We've come full circle with him. He was a guy that used to play well, but was frustrating because he lacked that end product. And now we're to the point where even on days where he doesn't play that well, now this season, more often than not, he's played well, but even on days where he doesn't play that well, like this game, he's now this tremendous match winner who Ancelotti keeps on the field because of his ability to score big goals. So it's amazing how we've come completely full circle with him. The big topic in Spain, though, is they're worried about the Champions League. Real Madrid are through. The other 4 teams, Barcelona, Sevilla, Atletico Madrid, and Villarreal, all in danger of getting knocked out. They're going into match day 6 in sticky situations, which for a country that's been accustomed to Champions League success, that would be quite the story. Barcelona in particular, they drew Benfica 0-0, which was a terrible result because it now sets up, they have to go to Bayern Munich match day 6, while Benfica are home to Dinamo Kiev. If Benfica take care of business against Dinamo Kiev, Barcelona would have to win that game away to Bayern Munich to avoid getting knocked out. So they're in big trouble there.
I mean, when I look at this in terms of the U.S., is it fair to say, Mosse, that we do not, and I say we as the U.S. men's national team, as bullish as we are about everything, we do not have a U.S. men's national team player that is starting for an elite team. They all, if they start, they're starting for mid-level teams, right? I mean, at a time
because
when
Barcelona and Juventus
is a mid-level team, Juventus is a mid-level team, Leipzig is a mid-level team, and Christian Pulisic doesn't start for Chelsea.
Yeah,
so
that is fair. Yeah,
that's my cold blanket or wet blanket on everything right there. But it's better than it has been. So, all right, what else, Mosse?
So, shifting to Germany, Erling Haaland finally came back. He came on in the second half and surprise, scored a goal. And then there was an absolutely hilarious exchange he had with a Wolfsburg fan. Did you see?
Oh, yeah. They flipped him off.
And then Bayern had a labored 1-0 win over Arminia Bielefeld. It sets up next week. Now, we dealt with this at Fox for 5 years. You always look foolish trying to hype up any Bundesliga game and trying to act like there's title implications because everybody assumes we all know how the story's going to end. But nevertheless, Bayern are only 1 point up, and next week they have to go to Dortmund with Erling Haaland back. So I actually am excited for that game. Should be a good one.
Absolutely. And, I commend Erling Haaland for not having that person kicked out of the stadium, despite the obscene gesture.
He did come back too late to help them in the Champions League. They lost to Sporting Lisbon midweek, and they are out, which, you think about Haaland. Norway obviously didn't qualify for the World Cup. Didn't even qualify for the playoffs. And now Dortmund get knocked out in the group stage of the Champions League. This is one of the great players in the world. He's going to be playing very few matches of real import in 2022, which is kind of disappointing. You want to see players like that compete in the biggest.
Well, maybe you should get a special spot then. We'll create a special spot like the Europeans like to do, and it's not the same without someone like him. And so
Jesse Marsch, by the way, Leipzig lost at home to Leverkusen, 2 straight Bundesliga defeats. They've slipped down to 8th. So after he had seemingly turned the corner there, and they've now fallen back a little bit, which is disappointing.
It'll be interesting ultimately where this comes out for Jesse Marsch, because he's kind of like the new hope, and a lot of pressure on him, but a lot of expectation that he is that person that is going to rise to the levels from a coaching perspective, an American coach that we haven't seen before.
Quickly in Italy, Napoli thumped Lazio 4-0. They're now 3 points clear at the top of the table because Milan lost to Sassuolo at home. Juventus fell to Atalanta. Weston McKennie came off injured in this game. There were concerns it might be a long-term thing, but
okay.
it sounds like he's okay, so that's good news. And then last thing in... I guess I'll call it European soccer because it's the ceremony's in Paris, but the Ballon d'Or is being awarded today. Luis, can you check? Do we know yet? It sounds like it's going to be Messi for the 7th time.
Right, yeah.
Luis taking his time, pulling out his phone there. We're live on the air.
We're recording this on Monday morning, and so it's happening as we speak. So we might just throw that in if and when we get a decision. You're okay with Messi if it's Messi? Does anybody... angry that it's Messi? I mean...
Again, it all hinges on... First of all, he's objectively the best player, so it's always justifiable to give him the award. And it all hinges on whether you buy the fact that Argentina winning the Copa America, their first major trophy in 28 years, was this monumental achievement.
No.
Because I think club-wise, with the season Barcelona had and his uneven start to life at PSG, it would be a little bit tougher to make that case. But if you plop a major international achievement onto his year, then it all of a sudden starts to look a lot better. But you're kind of shaking your head, so you think you would have given it to Lewandowski.
Not even a question. He shouldn't even have the ceremony or even any of the debate. It should just go to him.
Yeah, I mean, Luis is struggling there. So hopefully by the end of the show, we can wrap up this segment.
Okay. All right. Should we take a real quick break?
Yep.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have all the MLS roundup and all the action that has gone over the last week. Don't go anywhere. All right. We are back, and we are going to dive right into the beautiful chaos and craziness that is the MLS playoffs each and every year, but including this year. And MLS, just in its natural state, is a very, very difficult league to predict, and even more so when you get into the playoffs, as people are finding out as we go forward. Okay, so where should we start, Mosse?
Well, you wanted zaniness, and Real Salt Lake is certainly giving us some zaniness. A team that was seconds away from not making the playoffs is now 90 minutes away from MLS Cup.
All right, so Real Salt Lake, certainly low in the betting odds if you go to Fox Bet or anything like that, but number one in people's hearts in terms of that belief factor. And here's the thing, because somebody asked me about this this morning on Twitter, in that they're getting a little tired of seeing teams play that underdog role, and it is completely understandable that it happens in a league like MLS where the margins are so fine between teams, and it's a league that we know has been constructed and has been sold with this manufactured parity. And so what separates teams often is so little, even teams that win conferences and come in ranked high and all that kind of stuff. When we look at this Real Salt Lake team, this is a team that is, your proverbial underdog, and the what's the movie, the baseball movie where they're Major League or whatever, where the owner, they don't have an owner right now, and their coach left them mid-season, and Pablo Mastroianni has come in and made them believe in their self and used people dismissing them as ammunition and fodder, and then they have this perfect villain, and the villain that we all need in David Ochoa, the goalkeeper, who just constantly is talking smack and constantly providing us with bulletin board material. And I love it. I love it because it's one thing to talk, it's another thing to actually walk it. And this team, and in particular David Ochoa, when it was against Seattle, where they didn't even have a shot, ultimately he stood tall in the penalties. And then they this week go to Sporting KC. Sporting KC, the favorite. Sporting KC playing at home, and they find a way again at Sporting KC, which we'd be reminded is where they finished off the year and had that dramatic finish there. They find a way to win on a Bobby Wood last-second goal, but it wasn't the steal that the Seattle game was. They played much better, and when I say they played much better, they actually had shots, which in and of itself was an improvement. I do think that Sporting KC tactically decided to let RSL have the ball, but they never benefited from that. There was no transition. There was no space ultimately, and they certainly didn't make them pay when they did win that ball. So while tactically I understand what they were doing, it didn't work. And credit to Pablo Mastroianni and this team, and they find themselves now going to Portland to play against Portland. We all thought we were going to Sporting KC, and riding this wave and this power of being the underdog. And so I'll ask you again: do they have a chance now going into Portland? I mean, do you do it at your own peril now, writing off this RSL team?
Absolutely, they have a chance. Especially, Asprilla is suspended, and we don't know about Blanco's status. And I thought Real Salt Lake were good value for this win. They were the better team for large portions of the game, created chances, scored 2 nice goals. So, as you mentioned, very different from the Seattle result. They really earned this one. I will say on Ochoa, this notion that his antics on penalty kicks is throwing off the takers, that to me is a stretch. Okay, he saved one in that shootout. He guessed right. All the other ones he went the wrong way, and he went the wrong way on Russell's here. So, to me, that's much ado about nothing, his antics on penalty kicks.
I mean, the fall is going to be dramatic, all right? And look, there are going to be people out there with daggers when you put yourself out there. And as I said, I love it. It's wonderful. We don't have enough of that, to be quite honest with you, when it comes to our sport and to our league. So I'm here for it. But when you do that, and to be an agitator, it takes one to know one. People are going to come for you, and the blowback is going to be that much more intense because of the situation that you have created.
Very disappointing for SKC. I'm a big Peter Vermes fan, but this draw had really opened up for them with Colorado and Seattle getting knocked out, and this was a year where they should have gone to MLS Cup the way things broke. This is a bad loss for them.
It is. And if you want to say who's the better team, in both cases, it's okay, because this is soccer, and we know that the better team does not always win ultimately. But Pablo Mastroianni, I think rightfully so, even after the Seattle game, said it's not our responsibility to entertain anybody. My responsibility is to get this team to win by whatever means necessary. And it might be pretty, it might not be pretty, but ultimately he has gotten them to that final against Portland, and that will be interesting. As we mentioned, we are recording this on Monday. By the time you listen to this, it will be game day for New England hosting NYCFC, which is very strange because New England's playing their first game in 3.5 weeks. I don't know how many
23 days.
23 days, which is nuts. We'll get to that in a second. Let's get to games that have been played here. Colorado against Portland. The Western Conference champion Colorado Rapids, sold out stadium, everybody going crazy on national television. Beautiful day there in Denver. And once again, it doesn't. Well, it lived up. It wasn't a bad game, but once again, the favored, quote unquote favored. Even though we've talked about how small those margins are, the favored team in Colorado weren't able to get it done. Now, it wasn't, I don't think, because of rust, because they came out and they had plenty of opportunities, and they did not look like a team that also had been off a number of weeks, as opposed to Portland, which was playing 3 or 4 days later. What were your thoughts on the Colorado-Portland game?
It was interesting. When we spoke to Robin Fraser, who did a phenomenal job this season, but talked about his lineup before the game, he seemed more concerned with matching up with Portland. Mm-hmm. And we all saw when Barrios and Jonathan Lewis weren't starting, it was, boy, is he leaving a little too much attacking talent on the bench here? And he might have gone a bit too conservative in worrying about what Portland was going to do and matching up with them. And it came back to bite him. So that would be the only thing I would bring up in this game. I thought the Colorado lineup was a bit curious.
I also would say, we talk a lot, and we have on a lot of the broadcasts, about the importance of your big players showing up and your stars. But the irony is that this Portland team, well, we know Colorado doesn't have stars, right? That the team is the star, and it's by committee, not just scoring. But to your point, Robin Fraser was and has been very, very comfortable changing lineups, changing formations, changing all sorts of different personnel. And yet I thought that Portland ended up playing better when Sebastian Blanco ultimately left the field. Now, it doesn't mean that they're a better team without him, and I want him, as we all want, stars to be involved, and he is without a doubt one of the great players in the league. But that this is even happening, that Portland is hosting RSL, is because of a moment in time that did not involve that star being on the field. And I mean, I'm not saying that Mabiala is the star, but the dude has scored now in two consecutive playoff games, and they just looked a whole lot more sure of themselves after that injury going forward. I don't know if that's sustainable, and we'll see if Blanco gets back for this next game. But Portland, a team that understands the playoffs, obviously understands success in MLS playoffs and the unique aspects of the playoffs. Now they get to host it in Portland, which I don't think that they were anticipating. So, owner up there, Merritt Paulson's got to be pretty happy about this opportunity. I will be on site with my friend John Strong, who's just out his back door there because he lives up in Portland, and Stuart Holden. We'll be heading up there. So I can't wait to see not just this game, but I also can't wait to see Portland. It's been a long time since I've been up there.
And there's this amazing stat. The last 6 seasons, either Portland or Seattle has come out of the West, going all the way back to 2015. And, Portland, if they win this one, that streak lives on for another season.
It does. Okay, so goodbye, Colorado. As I think I said on air, this should do nothing to diminish the accomplishment of Robin Fraser and this Colorado team. They have become relevant again in this league, and for a long time they weren't. They just didn't have enough. And I think in the harsh light of that spotlight that they really weren't under for most of the year, they failed. And that's okay. They are still a work in progress, but that progress is heading in the right direction as far as that Colorado team. So congratulations, Portland going on. Philadelphia hosting Nashville. This was an interesting game, Mosse. I actually thought that once again, the better team did not necessarily win. I thought Nashville was really good on the day. I thought that they controlled a lot of the game. I thought that they created a whole lot more. I thought that their sense of how they wanted to play was, I think, much more apparent than Philadelphia. But you need big people to step up, and man, oh man, Andre Blake as a goalkeeper, he's had a hell of a year for club and country. And it's not as if we've just found out about this guy. He's been around for a while, plying his trade in Major League Soccer and consistently being, arguably the best goalkeeper in the league. And that was pretty amazing when it came down to the penalties at the end.
I agree with you. Even though Philadelphia is the higher seed and they were home, this felt like a minor upset that they advanced, because by the time this game rolled around, I kind of felt like Nashville was the better team. And even watching the game, I felt like they were the better team. And the way Mukhtar is going right now and Walker Zimmerman at the back, felt like they had the pieces in place. And Philadelphia somehow survived. And yeah, Andre Blake, and if New England knocks out NYCFC, which is a game we'll get to in a second, it would set up this unbelievable goalkeeper matchup in the conference final. Matt Turner against Andre Blake, the last 2 goalkeepers of the year. So,
Andre Blake is undoubtedly a star of that Philadelphia team. And you could just see, well, first off, Nashville, as good as they were, they're obviously not good at penalties. And whether it was Andre Blake saving them or Nashville just completely missing the goal, they now have time to go back and work on that aspect of the game if they really do. It was interesting to hear Walker Zimmerman after the game, and I suppose this is one way to go. He said, at least we kind of share in this blame. Usually is that one person that missed it, and it all falls on his or her shoulders. In this sense, they all screwed up, and they all bear the responsibility of not making their penalties, or even in some cases not even getting their, like Walker, not even getting their shots on goal. But ultimately, I think, again, in the way that I talked about Colorado, a very successful season for Nashville that has just kind of cruised along since coming into the league over the last couple of years and created a consistently competitive, not an elite team yet, but a consistently competitive team. And as we've seen, that is not always the case when it comes to expansion teams. Now, it's not at the level of an LAFC or an Atlanta coming into the league, but sure as hell isn't at a level of a Minnesota coming into the league, or a Cincinnati coming to the league, or an Inter coming into the league, Inter Miami. So congratulations to them still on a successful season when it comes to what Nashville is, and I think what Nashville is going to be. And they start turning some of those ties that they had, a historic number of ties this year, into wins. And you're looking now at potentially an elite team. And they have a new stadium coming too, so a lot to look forward to from a national perspective.
Gary Smith made an interesting comment leading up to this game. Philadelphia and Nashville finished with the same amount of points. Nashville had the better goal difference, but Philadelphia had more wins, so they finished as the higher seed and got to host this game. And Gary Smith made sort of a snarky comment that, in any other league in the world, we'd be hosting this game. Do you have any issue with the tiebreaker?
That's true, Gary, because in this league, we care about winning, okay, as we do in this country and in this culture, okay? And so that's why we put a priority on actually winning the games, which obviously you don't, and you look at your record, it makes it very, very clear that you don't. Had we been maybe in a different country and culture that puts a priority on tying the game, then you would have absolutely been everybody's choice.
So lastly, New England, NYCFC. As you mentioned, New England, a 23-day layoff.
It's not ideal. It's not ideal, Mosse. And I would think if Bruce Arena was here, who, by the way, before we came on air, was named Coach of the Year I don't think anybody's surprised, and I think it was overwhelming. So congratulations to Bruce Arena. Now they have Coach of the Year, they have Goalkeeper of the Year in Matt Turner. Unless something strange happens, I think Carlos Gil is going to be named MVP going forward. So all the individual accolades coming to this team, but that it has been so long since we have seen this team. Again, and we're going to do this game. So by the time you're listening to this, either the game will have happened, or maybe it's even happening right now, or it's about to happen. That rust is going to be concerning, especially when you're playing against a team like NYCFC that I do think sees an opportunity here.
You could make a case this is their toughest game on the road to winning MLS Cup because of the layoff and the quality of opposition.
Right.
They get through this game. They're then hosting Philadelphia in the conference finals, and then would host either Portland or RSL in MLS Cup. Could you not make that case given the layoff?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that NYCFC is a better team than Philadelphia.
I agree.
And so absolutely I think that this is very telling. And then obviously they're going to get RSL in the final if they go through. It is still, despite this long layoff, which as I said, I know is not ideal, but the alternative is to not give teams the added incentive and advantage, quote unquote advantage, of doing well in the regular season. And I know that I'm loath to, and I'm sure MLS is loath to take anything away. As a matter of fact, you want to put more incentive on the regular season, meaning as much as possible. I mean, one of the big knocks on American sports, and we do playoffs, is that the regular season doesn't mean anything. So to the extent that you can put things on the regular season that then do give you an advantage and benefit you in the playoffs, you need to do that. And this is one of those things. As I said, maybe it's not as much of an advantage because of the length of time off.
The problem is that international break in November, though.
That's it. That's it. But we've done this every single year, and the alternative is not is worse, I think. So I think ultimately this will stay. If they want to have teams have buys, or maybe Bruce Arena, who does carry a big voice, maybe in the post, in the off season they get together and they say, you know what, the buy thing really isn't that much of an advantage, so we really don't want to do something like that. But who knows? Okay, so New England hosting NYCFC. Their designated players, we know, are functioning, and they have, for all intents and purposes, more designated players in the form of Tejan Buchanan and Matt Turner. So this is a team that I would think that they're healthy, unless there, knock on wood, been some injuries in training. But they've had all of this time on, so they have to be healthy from a physical perspective and a mental perspective. But once again, the big question from them is, can you turn it on and off? And that is not as easy as it sounds, regardless of how good you are. And can you neutralize? And can NYCFC make the transition from playing at that postage stamp down in Yankee Stadium, where they're so good, now to a bigger field? I think they can. I think that that's actually easier for NYCFC to do than maybe for New England, just to turn it on and off. As you know, I'm a big NYCFC fan, so I see NYCFC upsetting, and it would be an upset, the New England Revolution.
And then beating Philadelphia. So you have them going to MLS Cup?
Yes, I do.
Wow. Ian Joy would be a happy man if that happened.
I mean, a lot has to happen, and I've gotten plenty wrong, as many people have gotten plenty of things wrong, but that's part of the fun, right?
Well, and you'll get hammered on Twitter for it. You are the David Ochoa of the soccer media.
There we go. That's wonderful. But what it shouldn't be noted, we are, as I said, broadcasting that too. So myself and Moadu, will be with Stu and John and Rob Stone. That's on FS1 on Tuesday, November 30th. You're probably listening to it on that day at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time is when that shows up. Who do you got in that one?
New England.
Okay. All right. Way to go on a limb. And then Portland RSL. We talked a little bit about that. Who do you have in that game?
Portland.
I do too. I do too. I think that this is where David Ochoa and company have that back to life, back to reality type.
Some
of
MLS
moment.
coaching news, Lex.
Yes. What do we got? Oh, by the way, we should mention that Saturday, December 4th, that Portland RSL game is happening. We will be broadcasting that. When I say we, I mean us at FS1. That will be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time.
And John Strong will be hosting the pregame of that one?
Yes, I am coming up as a third wheel, if you will. So we won't have actual studio. I will be going up and kind of being there for pregame, halftime, and postgame.
That means a lighter load for me because not only does John Strong not read my scripts, he has contempt for them. So I don't even bother writing for him.
Well, you know what? Everybody does their own thing. John likes to write. You know, he's a quirky dude. I love him. I love if you're listening, John.
Yep.
That's what makes him great.
Yep. So as I said, coaching news that I know you wanted to hit on.
Yeah, we mentioned Bob Bradley last week. That became official. And so, we talked about that last week. And I think it's a good hire. He is going to have all of the power there. And, this is, as you have people like Bob Bradley coming into these positions, what are they going to do? They're going to try to amass as much power as possible. And so he is, both the head coach and the sporting director, because you don't want to have to answer to anybody. And he looks around and he sees people like Peter Vermes that have done it, or Bruce Arena having done it. And if you can get it, that's great. And so they have given him carte blanche, the keys to the castle, if you will, up there. And considering how bad they were this year, it can only go up. And I think very quickly he will at least make them into a competitive team. But also down in Chicago, Ezra Hendrickson, former teammate of mine. He's bummed around MLS in terms of assistant coaching, including up in Seattle and in Columbus. Finally gets an opportunity to be a head coach for the Chicago Fire. So congratulations to Ezra Hendrickson. I know he has interviewed in the past for a number of different jobs and not been given this role. And so this is an interesting move from a Chicago Fire team that absolutely needs an injection of new vision and, once again, of making a team relevant. Because, the last time, they had the rebrand, and then the rebrand that they had, they moved from Bridgeview downtown, and that was going to happen, and it got kind of derailed with the pandemic. So we'll see if Ezra Hendrickson, as a head coach, and it's not always easy to make that transition from being an assistant coach, can make the Chicago Fire relevant again.
One interesting coaching note in Mexico before we get to the Copa Libertadores final. So the Liga is going on right now. The semifinals are set. It will be Atlas Pumas in one matchup, and then León against Tigres in the other. Tigres now managed by Miguel Herrera. And Pumas eliminated America in the quarterfinals. And, America went out, they hired Santiago Solari, who I know is Argentine, but he came from Real Madrid. So you almost view it as them hiring like a European coach. And I'm not saying one way is right, another way is wrong. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but it's just interesting, this clash of cultures. So in the 2 seasons he's managed them, they've collected the most regular season points, but they've crashed out early in the Liga. And so he's under all sorts of pressure now. People are asking him in press conferences whether he's going to resign. And Solari seems completely bemused by all this because he says, do you know my record? I've collected the most points in any other league. We'd be the champion. It's only because you guys have this goofy format. He didn't say that, but that was sort of the subtext of what he said. And so this whole notion of regular season and playoffs.
I don't care. You knew what you were getting into. You understood what the realities were on the ground. It's like somebody coming into MLS and say, I was supporter shielder, but you bombed out in the playoffs. No. You have to function in the country and culture and system in which you are a guest in. Okay, if I don't know, Ralph Ragnick comes in and they don't finish in top 4 or whatever, he can't say, yes, but have you seen the progress? And we've been playing some really beautiful football. No.
León, by the way, managed by Ariel Holan, who's a guy I love, who was treated horribly. He started the year managing Santos in Brazil and left after 10 games, was treated horribly there by the Brazilian media. And so I'm so happy that he's getting this sort of redemption here. I hope Leon win the whole thing just so I can shove that in the face of these morons in the Brazilian media.
All right. Well, speaking of shoving things in the face of people here.
Nice segue to the Copa Libertadores final, which was an all Brazilian affair. Palmeiras prevailed in extra time. The winning goal scored by Daverson, who heroically was able to finish this match despite getting punched by the referee. Did you see that horrible incident?
That kidney punch? Is that what that happened? Yes. I mean, it was all over social media, and even if you didn't see this game, I'm sure you saw the moment. It's a continued. It only confirms to what many people suspect is the ridiculousness when it comes to the antics of soccer players and therefore the game of soccer in the views of many people.
I thought Luis might have had that video ready for us, but apparently not. He took the week off apparently here. But no, as far as
crushing Luis today.
Too much logic and not enough worrying about the pot. But give Palmeiras credit. They came out ready to play. They were the better team for the first 60, 70 minutes of this game. They scored a beautiful opener. Gustavo Gomez over the top to Mikey, who cut it back to Rafael Veiga, slotted home. Flamengo just seemed out of it. And they do find an equalizer with Gabigol in the second half. A play where I thought that should have been a handball on Arrascaeta, but everybody said no. I've given up on trying to figure out the handball rule, but okay. Gabigol beats Weverton near post, which you can blame Weverton on, but I thought that was a very well-placed finish by Gabigol. And then the feel of the game was you could sense Flamengo growing, Palmeiras getting tired, and I thought Flamengo might get winner, and it would be similar to their 2019 final victory over River Plate, where they trailed 1-0 for a lot of the game and then scored 2 goals late and win it. I thought we were kind of heading for that again. Michael had a great chance late in regulation. And then even when we got into extra time, it just felt like Palmeiras would be the team holding on and trying to get to penalties while Flamengo would be on the front foot. And then early in extra time, Andreas Pereira with just a disastrous Steven Gerrard against Chelsea in 2014 type moment. Daverson playing the role of Demba Ba here. He takes advantage. He scores. So Palmeiras, second straight Libertadores title, first team since Boca Juniors to win 2 in a row. Boca won it in 2000, 2001. And Palmeiras now go to the Club World Cup, which they catch a little bit of a break here. The Club World Cup won't take place until February, which is going to be a bit awkward for Chelsea. It's going to be the same month where they're playing Champions League knockout games. And so you have Palmeiras in there, Chelsea, Monterrey is the CONCACAF participant. The draw actually occurred today, and we know that if Monterrey advanced to the semis, they would face Palmeiras. Last year, Palmeiras had the worst ever performance by a Brazilian club in the Club World Cup. They finished 4th, didn't score a goal in either game. And in the semis, they got completely bossed by Tigres, played off the field, lost 1-0. It should have been more than that. And so if it is that Palmeiras-Monterrey matchup, I'm going to be very curious because Palmeiras did have a little bit of an excuse last year. Even by normal Brazilian standards, they were in the midst of a preposterous run of games, crazy calendar. They were tired. And so they've pointed to that for a year and said, if we get back in this tournament, it's going to be a different story. This time around, we'll be ready. We'll be rested. And if it does end up being Palmeiras, Monterrey, that's always an interesting thing to gauge how these big Mexican clubs stack up against the big South American teams. So I'm going to be curious to see that matchup. I hope it happens. Palmeiras, Monterrey. Chelsea would presumably be waiting in the wings in the final against one of those two teams. So we have the Club World Cup coming up early February.
If somebody is looking at Palmeiras and Flamengo, and we've seen in the past when it comes to Copa Lib, when it comes to Brazil, that MLS teams have mined that tournament and have mined that area. If you were advising MLS teams out there, who would be someone that you would be targeting within reason? So let's make it doable.
I'll give you one player on either team that sort of fit that profile of veteran South American playmaker that's tended to do very well in MLS. I think Arrascaeta, who is this Uruguayan international we covered in the Copa America this past summer, he would fit in well in MLS. And then Dudu is a player for Palmeiras who I think would do very well. It's interesting. Seattle earlier this year tried to sign this young player, Wesley, from Palmeiras, who I love, was one of the best young players in Brazil. So if you're thinking more in terms of young guys, someone like that. But if you're thinking more veteran, established playmakers, I think Dudu and Arrascaeta would be interesting names for MLS to look at.
Well, we will see if anybody out there concurs and picks your brain and goes for that. Okay, thank you for that. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that time when you send us your comments, questions, or concerns, either on the social media platforms out there using that hashtag AskAlexi, or you call in on our State of the Union podcast hotline, which, by the way, is 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. And I think we have a couple of audio questions, a couple of calls into the hotline this week, right, Mosse?
Yep. First up, Ryan from Kansas City.
Hey, Alexi and David. Jim from Kalamazoo here. Just kidding. Ryan Yao from Kansas City. My question is regarding the upcoming World Cup hosted by Mexico, USA, and Canada in 2026. Being from a city that has a large soccer fan base, Kansas City, I'm very hopeful and ecstatic that some games during the tournament may be played here in KCMO. There are many cities on the potential hosting ballot, and my question is, which cities do you think will benefit most from a growth standpoint, and not only the economic boost of hosting a match, but growing soccer culture as well? My goal as a soccer-loving adult is to one day be able to go to a random bar by my home and be able to chat about the beautiful game with strangers while watching it on the big screen. Much love, take care, and happy holidays.
All right. Okay. So it's interesting because so let's look at history, right? It's not as if in 1994, Detroit, and when I say Detroit, I mean Pontiac. The Pontiac Silverdome was a venue. It's not as if, and being from there, I know this, it's not as if soccer ultimately exploded in the metropolitan Detroit area. No, Detroit is a soccer town, and there is, my beloved Detroit City FC and all that kind of stuff. But it didn't fundamentally change the area or the way that city and that metropolitan area looked at soccer, which is one of the selling points, if you will. And I think it's different nowadays because I think that there are many more when it comes to the host cities and the potential host cities. And by the way, I should read them off to you. So in the U.S., you're talking about Los Angeles, New York, New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Dallas, Kansas City, Denver, Houston, Baltimore, Atlanta, Philadelphia, Nashville, Seattle, San Francisco, or the Bay Area, Boston, Cincinnati, Miami, Orlando, these types of places. But when a lot of these teams now are making their pitch, it's that they are already soccer places. And so that it is an area that will be accommodating already to soccer. You're not fundamentally going to change it for a generation. Now, having a World Cup in a city, regardless, will create memories. So, when I look at, some of these places, it's really going to depend on what FIFA decides. They're going to go for the big places. We all know that Los Angeles is going to be there, New York's going to be there. But, when you're talking about places like Kansas City or Houston, they're already soccer cities, but I'm trying to think of a place that would fundamentally change simply by the fact that you had a World Cup. Who would benefit the most? I don't know. So I look at someplace like, would the World Cup in 2026 coming back, it would be back to Boston. When I say Boston, we know it's New England, right? Would that be the catalyst that finally gets a soccer-specific stadium built? Then you could say, obviously, that would be a hugely influential type of move there. I don't know. I don't know if it would happen. And there's no real, Cincinnati, we already know it's kind of a soccer town. They already have their soccer-specific stadium. They have their team, which isn't very, very good. And so how much more is it going to make that place a soccer place? Maybe a place like Nashville. And I know they have a new soccer-specific stadium and coming like that, but maybe a place like Nashville or Denver. Maybe Denver. Because that stadium right now, location is not a good location. It's not a good stadium. And so maybe that 2.0 stadium when it comes to the Colorado Rapids happens. And I know I'm looking at it in terms of infrastructure, I guess stadium builds, but hearts and minds type of that. Which one of these places isn't a soccer city? They're all soccer cities right now. And that's the major difference between what 2026 is relative to 1994, where you were going to places where, yes, there had been soccer and there had been a history of soccer, but you were going to some places that, you were appealing more to hearts and minds out there. I don't know. What do you think, Mosse?
Yeah, I agree. It's just a different landscape now, where I don't know that there's that many cities that need that sort of impetus, to become bigger soccer cities. But yeah, Nashville, that's a good shout.
And even if teams don't get it, it's not as if they need it. It's not as if this is the.
How about St. Louis?
St. Louis would be interesting, but I think, the circus comes and goes. And while it can be influential and important and make an impact, listen, the legacy of the '94 World Cup was the establishment of Major League Soccer 2 years later. So that's really what happened. And then those cities, a lot of those cities and a lot of those communities have used MLS as that day in and day out type of vehicle to promote the game. So I guess to answer your question, Ryan, and you're in Kansas City, would Kansas City benefit from a World Cup? I guess maybe in introducing the world to Kansas City, because as much as we love it and know it, the world comes to a World Cup. And if their teams are playing in Kansas City, they will experience and descend upon a city that, let's be honest, for the most part, they would never have been to. I know where Paysandú, Uruguay is because of a Copa America, a place that I would never, ever have been had it not been for Copa America. And so, yeah, in that sense, I think, maybe something like Kansas City, if you were to be a host of a World Cup in 2026, in general, the perception of your city would be enhanced.
Yeah, you took me down memory lane there. Brazil's final group match in '94 was in Detroit at the Pontiac Silverdome, 1-1 against Sweden.
Yep.
Romario scored a great goal. Two teams then met again in the semis at the Rose Bowl. Remember that great Sweden team? Martin Dahlin, Thomas Brolin.
Of course.
Ravelli.
Of course. But believe me, if you've been back to Pontiac, it's not as if it's a huge soccer mecca now. All right, what else?
I might get in trouble for saying this, but when I was going to college, my dad came to visit. We took a couple of trips to Detroit, and my dad compared it to the 1985 Hill Valley when Biff Tannen ruled the town.
Well, Detroit has changed a whole lot since then. And I'm talking about downtown Detroit proper. It's on its point 3.0 or whatever it is, but it's a whole lot different than it has been in a good way.
I'm going to change the order here so we can end on a fun note.
Okay.
So next, let's go to the Twitter question. At Hotboy Takes, he asks, what U.S. men's national team player's stock increased the most this year?
Okay. I think I was asked this question on Twitter, and so if I remember correctly, I think I said Miles Robinson, mostly for the sheer fact that before this year, while we knew about him, it was never in the context of the U.S. men's national team. And yet, even as recently as this past window, he was being written in marker as an automatic starter, and it's who's going to pair with Miles. And that's a pretty amazing leap, if you will. But I think it shows the quality, and I think it shows his ability to adapt and maybe conform to specifically what this coach and this coaching staff wants. And that's why they like him so much. And I think he has just grown and grown and grown. And certainly you can look at, a player like Brendan Aronson, whose stock absolutely has grown. But he was I guess he wasn't necessarily. So there's another good call there. Walker Zimmerman, for me, has always been great, so it's no surprise to me that he has established himself firmly. And keep in mind, when I'm talking about the center backs, this is in the context of a John Brooks who wasn't even called in the last. And when we first started the year, John Brooks was that person in Penn. So it can change, but I don't know. Who do you think when it comes to stock raising?
Miles Robinson's a great shout. Matt Turner, Pepe, emerging by the end of the year as the starting center forward. Brendan Aronson. Yeah, I think those are all guys that you can consider.
Anthony Robinson on the left-hand side. I know somebody had said that for me. I think the jury's still out with it when it comes to him. While he's been certainly getting starts, I am still not comfortable with him, and I've mentioned before, I think he's sporadic. I think that he can 1 minute look like world class in terms of his touch and his decision making, and in the very next minute do things that just boggle the mind in terms of the inability or the stupidity of decisions. So I think it still remains to be seen with someone like him.
All right, we'll end on an audio question.
All right, what do we got?
we've got Jerry from Michigan.
Hey guys, this is Jerry calling. I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I have a couple questions for Mosse. Mosse, I'm calling after the Wolverines beat up on Ohio State, and I just wonder, thinking about Coach Harbaugh, does this change your opinion or others' opinion on whether this helps maintain his legacy? In my opinion, he's not done a ton, and so just kind of curious if you feel that this is going to hold him together, and if there's soccer examples of a popular coach who really didn't accomplish much. Also, a second question, Mosse, is my daughter is graduating, wants to go to U of M like her older sister, and wonders if you have any pull as an esteemed and famous alumni with admissions to help her get in. All right, you guys thanks for everything you do. All right, thanks for answering it. Yep, bye.
Let me answer the second question first.
Okay.
Absolutely. Send me her name and she's in.
You got pull. You know people, right?
I'm on the Mount Rushmore of Michigan alums with like Gerald Ford and people like that. Tom Brady, Ted Kaczynski.
I got Ted Kaczynski. So before you talk the Wolverines, just so you know what my household was like over the weekend. So this big game was coming, and I think I mentioned before that my wife is a huge Ohio State Buckeye fan. It's so much so that weekends during the collegiate season and Saturdays, and obviously, she turns into a completely different person. And I sometimes have to stay away. And you know, the language and the attitude and the behavior relative to this Buckeye team's success or failure is quite amazing. I come to find out that she is not alone in this, in that our good friend and colleague Stuart Holden's wife also is this level of Buckeye fan. And so Stu had the bright idea to merge these two together on Saturday morning as we watched the game. While we had a wonderful time and food and drink was had by all, obviously it did not end well for the Buckeyes, and the attitudes and the behavior reflected the loss, shall I say.
Yeah, I did not receive a congratulatory text message from your wife.
They hate your team. They hate your school. They hate your team. They hate your coach. My goodness.
She can't handle losing this game once every 10 years.
No.
No?
It ruined her her disposition for the rest of the day, shall we say. So Saturday was a loss in more ways than one.
Yep. Well, as to Jerry's question, obviously enormous win for Jim Harbaugh. It's a major check off his look, to be fair, Jerry said he hasn't done much. He's made Michigan much better than it was what he inherited. So his overall record is good, but he has this issue with Ohio State, which is, people like to tack on the not winning Big Ten titles, not going to the playoff. That's inexorably linked to the Ohio State thing because we play them the last regular season game every year, and always you have to go through them to get to those things. So one sort of begets the other. And so, yeah, I mean, he really needed this. It was about time. And again, if we're talking about Jim Harbaugh's overall resume, the thing I always bring up is he does have success in the NFL and college, which is something very few coaches can say. So I actually think his coaching resume stacks up pretty well if you look at it the way I choose to look at it. But yeah, in terms of just his Michigan career, he needed this. And keep in mind, he revamped the whole coaching staff before the season and the whole recruiting department. So this had the feel of a reboot. And for him to go out in year one, let's call it, of this reboot and accomplish what he has, it does make you think that maybe this could be the start of some good things there.
To Jerry's question, is there someone from the soccer world that you would equate to them? Because the first person that comes to mind for me, and while to your point, he has had some success, because this is where it is a little apples to oranges, but I think the demeanor and the behavior and the animosity that he seems to create in others, it's Mourinho for me. He's not. I don't think is high on a pedestal in terms of his ability that Mourinho is, but the amount of people that look at Mourinho and say, "What a ass," or "What a jerk," I think is would be on par with the way that many people look at Jim Harbaugh. Unless he's your coach.
I'm going to bring up a guy who's 50 times more likable than Jim Harbaugh.
Okay.
But Jurgen Klopp, it started to get to a point there around year 4 or 5 with Liverpool where people started to say, he does have to win something, and we know he's a good coach, and everywhere he goes, he makes it better than it was when he got there. But some people start to look at his resume and feel like the level of prestige is disproportionate to what he's actually won in his career.
Interesting.
And then when he had that breakthrough where he won the Champions League with Liverpool in 2019, that flipped that narrative around. So there's a little bit of that play with Harbaugh here. If he were to go on and win, heck, obviously the national championship, that I don't know if that's possible, but I think that there would be a similar deal there, flipping that narrative.
What are they able to do now? So the
Big Ten is split into 2 divisions, the East and the West. And by virtue of this win over Ohio State, Michigan won the East Division. Iowa won the West. So now Michigan and Iowa will play in the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis this upcoming Saturday. Your buddy Rob Stone will be there, which, by the way, is not an easy game. So this whole thing could come crashing down the high of beating Ohio State. But then if Michigan beats Iowa, they will be in that. It's a 4-team playoff, which takes place in January, and that determines a national champion.
So Ohio State is not going to be in the top 4. The 4. There's only 4 teams, right?
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. It's a committee that gets together and decides on the 4 teams. So it's subjective. It's not like you can, quote unquote, clinch a spot in the playoff. You're at the mercy of them putting you in there. And to bring this all the way around to where we started this podcast, there's this debate because there's this team Cincinnati that's undefeated. But plays in a lesser conference, lesser schedule.
It's like Macedonia or Turkey. I don't want them in the
There's
tournament.
a school of thought that if it's supposed to be the best teams, and even a 2-loss Ohio State team should be in there, or if Alabama loses 2 games, they should still be in there. And then there are others that are turned off by that. They think it's elitist. Let them eat cake.
Let Cincinnati eat cake.
So there is this debate that goes on in college football, too, with this kind of stuff. So, and with the college basketball tournament every year, when the selection committee chooses teams, how much is it getting the best teams in there versus spreading it around, giving small conferences a chance? So, yeah, to bring it all the way around, this is a debate that occurs in every sport to some degree, and we see it with certainly the World Cup and FIFA and qualifying and all that.
Okay. So, also in a soccer sense, if this Michigan, the Wolverines of Michigan, your team, go and lose, for example, to Iowa, it would be like RSL going to Portland and then losing and,
If that happens, then there's a good chance the Big Ten would be shut out altogether of the playoffs. But the consolation prize for me is I think that would probably send Michigan to the Rose Bowl January 1st, which I would attend that game.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, good question there from Jerry over there in the great state of Michigan. Regardless of I don't care. It doesn't matter to me who wins or loses. But it matters to me because of my wife, and I would like to have a peaceful and happy Saturday at all times, and that doesn't happen when something like this happens. All right, well, congratulations, Mosse, to you and your Wolverines on a big win. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right. Again, thank you for your questions. And again, a reminder when it comes to the hotline out there that both Ryan and Jerry utilized. That's 657-549-2297, our State of the Union podcast hotline at 657-549-2297. All right. We're coming to the end of the show. So we're going to take a real quick break here. When we come back, I will have my one for the road. Don't go anywhere. All right, we are back, and it's the end of yet another show. And at the end of each and every show, I give you my one for the road. You are listening to this, well, as we recorded this on a Monday, so after that, maybe on a Tuesday. This time next week, I will be in the country of Qatar. Yet again, a return visit for me. Myself and my good friend Stu Holden, who we've talked about, are heading out on the road. We are heading over there to shoot a bunch of stuff that actually is going to live for the next year, and you will probably see closer to the World Cup next November and December. And we just want to make sure that we get there and we have the facilities and the personnel to be able to do that, to give people an idea of what that country is. And so Stu and I will be kind of traveling around and doing a bunch of different things, which means that your State of the Union podcast will be, from my end of it, be on the road. We haven't quite figured out logistics and how this is going to happen, but we will definitely get you a show next week when I will be there. And, I will continue to update you on how that trip is going, because my trip a couple months ago was fascinating, but it was only a couple of days. This time we're going to be out there for a couple of weeks shooting a bunch of different stuff. And so I will get to see a whole lot more of Doha, the major capital city there, and the country of Qatar, which as we know, is hosting the World Cup in November and December. So I look forward to that trip. I got a Saturday game in Portland, as I mentioned, and then I fly back to LA and then off to Doha on that 15 and a half hour flight. So I will have plenty of time, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from me at 37,000 feet as I head over the polar cap on Twitter, letting you know where I am and what's going on. But we will get that out to you, and it's always fun. I am enjoying traveling more. As you know, Mosse, my life for a number of years has been about traveling around, and that was severely and abruptly curtailed with the pandemic. And it started to come back, and who knows where we're going and what's happening right now. But for now, we are starting to travel a little bit more, and it's fun for me, whether it's going up to Portland, a great city that I've been to, but obviously haven't been to in a number of years because of travel restrictions and COVID, or going across the world to a place like Qatar and discovering a new country and culture. It's part of what makes my job great. It's part of how lucky I am to be in this position, to be able to do these things, and I certainly don't take it for granted. And I love each and every opportunity that I get. And so with that, I will bid you adieu. Mosse, anything before we head out?
That's it.
Keep reviewing and downloading and subscribing and contacting us. We appreciate so much all of the different ways that you get in touch with us, including, and in particular, the hotline out there, which I think is going really well. 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. And it really kind of gives us an interesting and a really better look and feel for who the listener is. And it's been really fun to see people's personalities come through, and obviously the incredible content that you generate, thankfully, for us to talk about when it comes to our AskAlexi segment. So thank you very much. Enjoy your soccer this week. I will speak to you again next week from Qatar. Mosse will speak to you here from Los Angeles, and we will be here same time, same place on the State of the Union podcast. And until then, I'm sorry, you got something to say.
Do we have a Ballon d'Or winner? Can we sign off with some news?
The ceremony is not started yet.
Ceremony has not started yet, so you're not going to get your Ballon news.
Right, so we'll discuss next week.
We will discuss how Robert Lewandowski was robbed of the Ballon d'Or. All right, we'll see you next week. Until then, as always, size the day.
You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.